Speaking of who we just were speaking of.
Oh,
Hello,
man.
everyone. We are excited for this webinar. I'm going to kind of let people roll in here for the next minute or so, and then we'll get started. I see some friendly names there. So sit tight for about a minute, and then we'll get started with Ryan. Hello again to those that are just joining us. We're excited about this webinar. We'll probably start in about 1 more minute. I'm just letting a few more people roll through for the attendees, and we'll get rolling this conversation with Ryan. All right. I think we're good. Looks like everybody's come through here. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm excited to introduce Ryan here. So let me kind of read from my script really quick here. Welcome, everyone. This is our 5th episode in the series of Sustaining the Human Weapon System. For those that do not know me, my name is Thomas Dewey. Besides hosting this little webinar series, I am a customer success manager with Sparta Science. Prior to joining Sparta Science, I worked as an athletic trainer, strength coach, and researcher within the Department of Defense, with the majority of my time being spent with Naval Special Warfare. It is with great excitement that I introduce today's guest, Ryan Carroll. Ryan has had a remarkable career spanning over 2 decades as a human performance practitioner. Ryan brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to our conversation. Throughout these 20 years, Ryan has worked as a strength coach, a program manager, both in the tactical and athletic settings. Additionally, his time in a tech startup with Bridge Athletic provides Ryan with a unique lens to view the human performance landscape. Ryan received his undergraduate degree in exercise science from Marquette University and his master's degree in biomechanics from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Today, we will draw upon Ryan's experience acquired through his journey from in the trench strength coach to tech startup, and now to his current role in managing the United States Army Special Operations Command Human Performance Wellness Program. Ryan's unique perspectives will provide insight into addressing the challenges of implementing human performance technology within the Department of Defense. Ryan, thanks again for chatting with us.
Absolutely, Thomas. I'm happy to be here, and I'll give the typical spiel here before we start. These are my personal views. They're not the views of the Army, the DoD, or any of that type of stuff. So yeah, let's get it going.
All right. So for any of the non-Department of Defense practitioners joining us today, I want to do a little bit of level setting. A lot of times people that work in the Department of Defense love to hide behind their acronyms. And if I was in Congress, I'd run for election saying you can't use acronyms. You have to say it first before you use the acronym. But so, for example, DoD, that's Department of Defense. USASOC, that is U.S. or United States Army Special Operations Command. HP is just a general term for human performance. HPW is human performance and wellness. That is the Army's POTFF. And let me go to POTFF here. Sorry, that is the Army's Preservation of the Force and Family Initiative. POTFF stands for Preservation of the Force and Family, and that's what kind of funds all of these special operation commands. So before we get started here, Ryan, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. I didn't prepare you with this, but just let me know how you got into this human performance world. Like, what made you become a strength coach?
Yeah, sure. Well, before I jump into that, I will just share a little anecdote on the acronym. So it's an interesting situation when you come into these jobs and you see these emails and you sit in rooms and every other word is not a word. It's a 3-letter code and 4-letter code. And you're like, what am I doing here? And then before you know it, you're writing emails that are in exactly that code. So yeah, apologize for that up front. But yeah, so my journey, man, I grew up playing sports, soccer, hockey, in a town outside of St. Louis. My dad was in the Air Force. So we were there for quite a while and really just wanted to initially be in athletics. At that time, at least where I grew up, weight training wasn't really that big of a deal. Like, we didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. We didn't lift weights. We just, we played. In fact, we probably did more damage. Our coaches probably did more damage to us than good with, stuff we did in practice to get us, conditioned. But, coming out of high school, I really wanted to continue to play hockey, and B, was really interested in physical therapy because I thought it would keep me in sports and in athletics. Didn't really know where, didn't think about pro sports, college, any of that stuff. I just knew, hey, I kind of like the physical therapy stuff. And, I went to Marquette as a exercise science major. It was actually their first class of exercise science. And started doing some stuff, had a little bit of opportunity to kind of observe and just look at what physical therapy students were doing, and quickly realized at that time there was more of this kind of elderly focus, like, hey, how do we help elderly patients get out of bed and rehab from different things? And I was like, that is absolutely not what I want to be doing. But I stayed in exercise science because it was interesting to me. And eventually, I think it was my junior year, I had a strength and conditioning course, and it really kind of hit something within me, and it was probably the class that I did the best in, and I just started attaching myself to that instructor who his name is Bill Eben. He was with the Green Bay Packers for a little bit, and just started asking questions and trying to find out everything I could about about strength and conditioning. I ended up my first semester senior year, I did a cool research project on strength and conditioning practices of NHL coaches that was actually published. So I got to kind of ask those NHL coaches, hey, what types of training do you do with your athletes? How often, before practice, after practice, that kind of stuff. And then I got to intern at DePaul University in Chicago with a guy named Tim Lang, who used to be the big league strength coach for the Texas Rangers, and then the Chicago White Sox under Vern Gambetta, and worked with Steve Odgers. So
Good old
that
Vern.
opened up, yeah. So that opened up a lot of doors to the baseball world. So I ended up deciding to go to grad school at University of Tennessee because I could work in the weight room there. I had a connection that kind of got me in there, and worked in minor league baseball with the Rockies, actually the summer in between semesters in grad school. And then swapped over after I graduated with the White Sox, and stayed with them for a few years. And then got an opportunity to be the head strength coach at Loyola University in Chicago. That was a pretty interesting experience, prepared me very well, I think, for the military environment, because it was me and 250 kids, no assistants, about 5,000 square feet, and just mass chaos for 5 years. Ended up jumping back into baseball for a couple of years, got tired of traveling and living out of a suitcase in places like Great Falls, Montana, and was actually on the drive home when I think I saw something in LinkedIn or something, maybe about opportunities to work for Exos in the military population. And so I sent my stuff in, got a call back from a gentleman named Russ Orr, who folks on the webinar may know, who said, hey, we've got this opportunity out in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I'm sure you're not going to want to go there, but it's a good opportunity. And lucky for them and me, I had family in Fayetteville. So I said, hey, I'd love to do it. So jumped into POTFF like right when it was starting. So 2012, 2013.
Yep.
At a special mission unit at Fort Bragg, and was there for about 6 years before I kind of was a little bit burnt out and decided I needed to do something different and kind of take a step back for a little bit. So luckily we had just started using Bridge Athletic, and we'll try not to be brand specific here on this, but part of my journey, and was there managing the tactical sales side of things for about 3 years before this opportunity here at First Special Forces Command became available, and loved my time at Bridge and what I was doing and the team there, but these positions don't come around that often, much less at the at the level that I'm at programmatically, and I thought it was a good professional challenge for me. And so, I've been here for about a year and a half, and yeah, so a long way to tell you that's how I got interested into strength conditioning, and here I am in DC, on the webinar with you, ready to talk about tech.
No, it's great. And I think a lot of our careers kind of that same way. The ones, I was kind of part of that same 2013, Exos class that came in with POTFF, with the first hires. And then, during that, you remember like that April, all those people got fired because, money was being spent that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I hope I wasn't that person that just moved across country. And there's a lot of people that moved across country and got fired and had to figure things out. So it was good times, and there were some bad times in that first POTFF expansion there.
Yeah.
So with your time, kind of everything you've seen, can you provide a kind of overview of how USASOCs, as for acronyms people there, that's U.S. Special Force or Army Special Forces, HP initiatives have like evolved over the years, kind of from where it was when you were with Exos and kind of now where it is today?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll kind of just give you an overview of, I think, how everything's gone. And, like we were talking about beforehand, I think in general, all these programs, even like the POTFF program and, H2F, the holistic health and fitness, and, BOST and all those things, like they're still so young. Even the POTFF program at, I don't know, we're 13, 14 years now, something like that. Like it's still very young. But I think initially when we were starting out, there wasn't a whole lot of tech involved. I think it was kind of that wave, or that period before the wave kind of hit. But I mean, I do remember things like using we use Zephyr for some selection stuff, and I just remember the millions of data points that would come in, and sitting there like, all right, so we've gone from I don't have the ability to capture any data, to now I have so much data, I don't know where to start looking at it. You had it was kind of wild west, because at that time I don't think the government, the military, understood what we were all trying to do and what we were trying to push for. At the same time, we had kind of big budgets because it was in the middle of GWAT, another one, Global War on Terror.
Yep.
So, people were throwing money at special operations, like, hey, whatever you guys need to go down range and do the job. And so you had people just buying stuff. And I would argue, not necessarily asking the right questions, just probably coming from, like we did, college, where, hey, there is no money, to, hey, you have a lot of money and we need you to spend it tomorrow. And you're just grabbing stuff off the shelf. I remember, using stuff like Sparta, plates, and, at that time we hadn't started using, we just started using an athlete management system as I was leaving, my AFSOC position. And so it was really just kind of getting started. I took that kind of step back and worked kind of outside in industry. And I feel like things really changed. Like you had the force plates coming, kind of more than just, there was Sparta, but now there's other companies coming in, and there's GPS, and there's Catapult, and like, hey, can we even use GPS? And do we even want to track these guys' locations? And, there's remote training software, and, there's all kinds of stuff. And so I think it really has come a long way in terms of, hey, we're just buying stuff because we have money and nobody's really asking questions, to now it's like we have GOs, general officers, pushing for certain, not necessarily companies, but pushing for certain pieces of technology or certain HPW initiatives, human performance initiatives, because they've been in the system long enough to see the value. And with that comes more questions, more scrutiny, more hurdles that we have to jump that maybe we didn't have to jump, 4 or 5 years ago. So it really has kind of changed and evolved. And, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that wave over the next 5 or 10 years, and where we end up being.
Yeah, I think, when you get into this field, especially with the DoD, you want to make this quick change right away. But we forget it's a big ship to steer. And you kind of can see it with what's happening with H2F. Like, they dropped all this money, they created the ACFT, and then now Congress is like, I'm not sure if we want to do this. It's like, wait, we got to give it some more time. He's like, we have to
Right.
let these junior officers mature through this program. So when they are now 05s, 06s, they understand how to do it. And that's what I saw with NSW. Like, I was there long enough to see the guy was in, 03, and then he's now in 04, 05. He understands, and that senior enlisted understands kind of what human performance is and how it integrates into their life to make them a better, father, husband, and operator. So in kind of in that vein, we're talking about how this tech has evolved from like free for all to now we're maybe investigating a little bit more. Where do you see the role of tech within USASOC's human performance wellness program initiatives?
Well, I would say my take on it, and it's not purely USASOC. It's, to me, it's everything. It's H2F, it's Army, it's all these programs, because let's face it, we talk about, hey, these programs they're like the pros, they're like Division I college. Like, we're lucky if they're Division III with the numbers that most of us have. So to me, where tech comes in is tech is a force multiplier. Like, tech is our way to reach more people, to influence more people, to automate information collection. There's no way that a coach at an SF group can reach, a couple thousand people. It's just not possible. And it's also not realistic to expect, and at least anytime soon, the Department of Defense to put the money into, hey, we have to have these 1 to 25 to 30 people ratios that we as practitioners would all like. It's just not going to happen. Not to mention, if we want to physically reach more people that are walking into the room, then we probably have to spend less time programming and assessing and all those things that we'd like to do to make informed decisions. There's just not enough hours in the day. So, to me, that's where the tech comes in is, we force multiply, we communicate with more people, we can hopefully show utilization, return on investment, and ideally we can automate that process to where our people on the ground that are doing the day-to-day grind aren't sitting in front of a computer hacking away while soldiers just walk by, when those are the people that we need to be going face to face with. So yeah, I'm hopeful that's, I think we're slowly progressing towards it. Like you said earlier, this is a big battleship that we're trying to steer, and it's going to happen a degree or two at a time. But that's kind of, I think, where at least I see we're at now with our programs and with technology.
You kind of like hit on another question I'm going to ask later, but I'm going to bring it up now is like, with tech, a lot of times people think like, well, that's going to remove the coach from the floor, right? That's going to remove that communication. So there's a balance there, right? Between utilizing the tech for what it is, and then also having that invaluable, like one-on-one touch with an operator, like those soft skills that were there, because you're like, hey, how's the wife doing? Oh, how's the baby doing? It's still colicky. Like those little connections that we can't quantify for Congress of like our ROI, but we all know that are in the trenches. Those are huge. Those contacts are huge contacts that are really making change. So where you kind of touched on it, but if you could expand a little bit more, kind of striking that balance between tech and integration and kind of the human capital.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I think you're not going to get the utilization of the technology without the relationship preceding it. And I'm sure there's other things that we were going to talk about here, but to me, the relationship, and I'll say something that may be a bit of a hot take, but I'll explain my point of view here. The relationship starts with the staff. What I mean by the staff, like the comptroller, the legal, the whoever else has to check off on that. That's where the relationship starts, because you're not even going to get out the door unless those people are willing to help you get through the process. Because I don't care how long you think you've been doing this, those people, they're like, I mean, they're all like lawyers. Like, they know every point and every check mark that has to be done to procure that stuff. So you have to build relationships with them first. Then you have to you have to have the relationship and the trust and the conversations with your staff to say, hey, is this technology that we're going to buy, is that solving a problem that we actually have? And then if it is, then it's up to the relationship between the staff and that operator to have the trust to say, hey, I'm going to try to put this piece of tech on you. I'm going to program for you on this thing. I'm going to have you do this, jump on this force plate, because we're looking to solve this problem. Because like we were talking about before, and I think everybody on the call probably understands, you get 1 or 2 shots with those guys and gals. So if you promise them something, or you have them try something that you don't know, like, we don't know what the exact outcome is going to be, but you better be able to explain why you just attach them to a Zephyr and have a million data points and can't tell them exactly what you're looking at yet. Like, you better understand that, because you're not going to be able to put that back on them. Or, hey, we did this jump scan and I don't know what, if your left-right asymmetry is bad or not. Like, you better have an answer. So it takes that trust and those relationships from that, from the top down in this situation, to gain the trust of those folks that are on the ground. Because we've gotten to the point, and I forget if Joe mentioned this on his call or not, but we've gotten to the point where guys and gals are done being lab rats. They're gone are the days of, hey, let me try this, and then I'm not going to get back to you with whatever we found. Like, they have to see it. And that's why, that technology piece where they get the instant feedback is so critical and so important. So very long way to circle back to your original question. I think we have to continue to message that, yeah, you're never going to be able to run the tech or utilize the tech without the human component. Guys and gals are still going to want to be coached. It's still your job to get out there when they're on the floor in the room with you and coach them. It's still your job, even if they're deployed, to email them and ask them how things are going, to ask them critical questions that will help you evaluate where they are physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, there's nothing against doing that. But at the same time, it's very important that we have those folks, like, hey, they're in there, you're talking to them, but they have that tablet up on the rack. They're still entering in what they're doing. You're able to actually go back and see what they did, monitor their programming, modify it one way or the other. You're able to have them jump and then re-jump. And all of that ultimately helps them. It continues to build and drive that trust. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's a way we can have one without the other. And it's actually really interesting. I'm here in DC right now for a course, and we're talking about AI. And if you don't know that acronym, I'm not going to explain it to you. Go Google it. But like, there's a concern for everybody in every profession that AI is going to come in and take over. And I just don't think, I think that we are probably one of the safer places, because you need and have to have that personal interaction with anything we do. Like, yeah, I could go into ChatGPT and probably write a workout, but without the coaching and the instruction and the cultivating there behind all those movements, like, it's really nothing. So yeah, there's definitely a clear like combination of human with tech that has to happen at all times.
Yeah, it's kind of that, I talk about this, I probably said this on every webinar I've had, but that feedback loop, right? It's so important for trust. It's so important to get people to like have consistency on things. And that feedback loop, we're talking about AI, like, there's no feedback loop when it comes to AI writing a program. The feedback loop is like then talking to the guy. It's like, hey, yeah, that, those squats hurt my knee today. Oh, let's go watch your squat. Oh, you're doing a little valgus when you're squatting down now. Like those are that's the feedback that like drives that coach in that conversation. Another thing, like since I've been now with Sparta, I never thought about this and saw the world through this lens, but like the user interface and the user experience lens. And whenever I thought about it, even as a practitioner, it was more like on my lens, like how was I interacting with the software, that I was using for some clinical practice. But now I think that user experience and that user interface on the end user, the operator, is huge, right? Like Aura or Whoop, like those things are right there, Bridge, it's all right there. And even hardware like Sparta, like, it's, you can delve deeper into it if you want to nerd out like a strength coach, but it's also displayed easy enough for the the operator to see and like understand, like, oh, that's what's going on. So like that user interface and user experience is a huge piece to this tech integration. And I think it delves, kind of meshes well with kind of the human capability piece as well.
Yeah.
So being on both sides of that fence, right? You were a DoD, the DoD fence, selling, vendor selling technology, and now, you're on the other side of the fence, a purchaser buying technology. What typical challenges and obstacles did you typically face when implementing new technology on the vendor side? And then how are you seeing that now on the purchaser side? And, how can we how can you teach me at Sparta, to do a better job?
Yeah, all the tech salespeople are chiming in right now. No, so I mean, I think the first one is understanding the environment as a as a vendor. So, understanding the GPC card cutoffs and the contracting limits and the base plus X option years and having your company in SAM.gov and having a DUNS number and cage code and all that. Like you almost can't get started if you don't understand that stuff. And you can price yourself out of business very easily if you don't understand that stuff. Like, I mean, I remember being in situations where, you have to critically think about, it's kind of a risk reward. Like, hey, we don't want to devalue our product, but also there could be a big opportunity on the back end. So how do you manage that? How do you balance that? And then, even understanding things like sole source versus best value versus all those things, like the different contract types, like IDIQs and, things like that, so that you understand kind of what you're getting into, you understand what the possibilities are, you understand what's probably going to be required, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. Even just understanding the fiscal year for the government. For everybody out there that doesn't know, it's October 1st to September 30th or 31st, however many number of days September has in it. But understanding that, because that would, that could ebb and flow with your sales cycle. So, it got to the point where I understood that Q1 is just like, it's dead. Like nothing is going to happen.
You're in a CR.
Right, because nobody gets money until a CR is passed. And even, lately, CRs keep getting pushed later and later. So money falls later and later. But that Q3, Q4 things start to open up a little bit. So understanding that, is key to success. Now, on the other side, I think things like understanding the right questions to ask. So like, hey, who owns the data? Because whether you ask that now or not, your data people are going to ask it at some point. And if you don't know, you can stall the entire process. Or if you come back and you don't own the data, like that's a big problem. I think that's important. I think as the buyer, like talking to and getting concurrence and building those relationships with your tech people, your JAG, your contracting people, even understanding like, hey, what can you say? What can you not say? Like, things like you can't obligate or make a decision on behalf of the government. Like things like that are, things that you have to understand. I try my best. It's almost like, when I worked in baseball, PEDs were big, but I purposefully, maybe this is the wrong decision, chose to be very, very dumb on that stuff because I didn't want anybody to ask me, because I didn't want to give the wrong answer, and I didn't want to get fired. It's kind of like, I don't necessarily take that approach now, but I just try to use common sense and say, hey, like, do you think I can say this? I don't know. Like, let me go ask somebody, before I go and sit with somebody and tell them like, hey, yeah, we're moving forward. Like, we're going to do this, or, yep, you guys have the contract. And it's like, some of those things you cannot say. And it will come back to bite you, because you may go into some bidding thing or put it out for bid, and some company loses, and they're like, hey, Ryan said that, like, we won this like 2 months ago. I have it in an email. And now you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So I think, that part goes into it. I think, I guess, kind of jumping back and forth, like understanding the battle that we have with Bluetooth. GPS is still kind of questionable. Understand, like, I don't want to name the product, but, I was talking to somebody recently, and they're like, hey, in this particular item, like, no, there's no Bluetooth, but, we're moving that way. The next edition is going to have that. It's like, well, that's a non-starter for us. So, as a company, understanding that, so you understand that there may be a point where we may have to have a government version and a public version, because
Yeah.
there's going to be restrictions that if we go to all Bluetooth, like, that's a non-starter for some government military groups. So, I would say it's a lot of back and forth. But I think understanding those two sides of it, and like I said, the big thing to me is, is who owns the data, and working with your team. And obviously right now there's a lot with where your company resides, like where they're based out of. Are they an international company? Do they have any touch with the Chinese? Like, stuff like that is very touchy right now. So, understanding that that's the environment, and having answers, or being able to talk to your company about that, I think is big. And understanding from the other side, the purchaser side, that you have to ask those questions, because somebody will, and you don't want to waste anybody's time by not having the answer, when that answer would have ended the conversation weeks or months ago.
Yeah. Does that kettlebell come from China? We can't buy it from you.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that far, what was it? FAR 90. I forget what it was, but that
Yeah.
paperwork that they had to be signed, then there was no Chinese tech in anything.
Yeah.
So, kind of top down, bottom up, middle down type of thing, right? When it comes to human performance technologies and lining leadership, whether that's the GOs, the operator, and now the human performance tech practitioner, how do you go about aligning them and kind of getting everyone kind of in step? Is the operator bringing you, hey, this is a cool tech, I want to do it? Is it the practitioner, as you said, like the GOs are purchasing some wearables? Who's driving that conversation? Or is it kind of just everyone's doing it and you're the middleman kind of controlling the spoke of that, flywheel?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's coming from everywhere. The operators, the soldiers, like, they're smart, they're sharp. They're out there looking at YouTube videos and reading stuff on the dark web and all that stuff, and coming back and saying, hey, I saw this, or I want to try that. And you also have some of that on the leadership side, where they have an interest in something, and they have good intentions, but they're like, hey, I really want to do this. And so it forces you to have to be kind of up to date on a lot of that stuff, or be able to say, hey, all right, pause, understand you like this. Let's dig into the problem that you're trying to solve, whether it's the soldier or it's the leader. What are you trying to address that you think this thing's going to do? All right, you think it's going to do this. Cool. Either, yep, I know that like, yep, that's a good option. Like that's a good product that can address that. Or, hey, I'm not sure. Let me go do some digging. Let me go do some research and I'll get you a full, white paper readout. I'll get you our options of, hey, maybe this product isn't the best for that because of these reasons, but here's another one over here that is more validated, has more research, has been used in a tactical population, whatever the reason might be. And you can use that up and down. Because our folks do have the latitude to, they're taught to solve their own problem. So, sometimes I'm guilty of this too, getting frustrated. Like, man, why do these guys keep hammering me with this stupid stuff? Well, at least they're coming to you instead of just going out and buying it, because some of them could just go do that. But I
Who's on
think
Joe
that's
Rogan,
really
that's why.
exactly. But I think that's how you manage it. Like you start with that problem question that, hey, what gap are you seeing that you're trying to solve? Because maybe you don't even need tech to do it. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. Maybe it's like, hey, let's try if it's a soldier, hey, let's try these 3 things. And if we don't get those to work or we're having issues with that, then, that'll give me the time to do the research, to go look up this piece of tech and, we can look to implement it. That's probably how I try to handle it the best. And luckily I think, at least like what was scary to me sometimes is the leadership, because at the end of the day, they can do what they want to, and they have the pocketbooks to do it. But most of them are pretty logical about it. Like, hey, what do you think about this? I think we should do this. And they'll listen to you. Now they may ultimately say, got it, understood, Ryan. I still want to buy that. And then they go do it. But you just kind of have to play that game and ask those questions and try to understand where it's coming from.
On the flip side of that, kind of those Luddites in the world that are just anti-tech everything, is never going to do it, whether or they're, risk adverse because of potential security risks of this. How do you kind of nourish those relationships when it's like, hey, sir, or whoever, I get it, there is some risk here, but the benefits outweigh the risk when it comes to, working with our operators or kind of moving in the next step towards kind of improving human performance?
Yeah, so I think what my approach ideally is. There's that book about like crossing the chasm, I think it is, where you have the the early adopters and the late adopters and everything in between. And I think you're going to have that as a microcosm of whatever group you're working with. And your early adopters are probably very similar to the folks that like, hey, this guy comes in every day. This guy's been on a program with me since day one. Like he will do whatever I do. Maybe you don't go out and buy enough tech to supplement the entire group that you're working with. Maybe you start with a pilot that's like 15 licenses of something. And you're just like, hey, I'm gonna grab the 15 most invested guys or gals that I work with, and we're gonna test this out. We already have a lot of trust, so I have a little leeway there if things go wrong. But B, I can use that as a teaser for the people that are either questioning it or would never want to do it, because those folks are going to talk, or they're going to see that person utilizing the tech and be like, hey, what's that? Hey, why is that guy getting that? Well, because that guy's done his baseline assessment.
Yeah.
He's done this, that, the other. Like he's checked off these boxes, so he's earned the right to get to test out that tech. You want to use that tech? Here's the calendar. Let's schedule your assessment, whatever that is. So, I think that's my approach to it, is let's start small. Let's build up the justification. Let's show the value, the benefit, because it's, in my mind, it's low risk, low risk, probably high reward potentially. Hey, if we try this and we spend $1,000 and, the 15 people, like 10 of them hate it and say they'll never wear it or use it, well, okay, we're out that. But if I go spend, $100K on something and I'm like, hey, we're going to outfit everybody and everybody's going to be using this in the next 2 weeks. And then, in 2 weeks, I got 2 people using it, then I'm out a lot, and I kind of look like an idiot because I jumped out and didn't plan properly or forecast properly. So that's probably how I would handle that.
Yeah, the implementation process of tech is huge, and like understanding, and every context is different of how to roll it out, and
Yeah.
and being iterative with it. So on either the vendor side or the DoD side, do you have any success stories? You can leave out who it is, where you saw, like tech implemented perfectly, and you're like, hey, this is the use case for how this tech should be, everything should be implemented.
Yeah, I don't think there's a 100% successful implementation plan. If there is, I'd love to see it from anybody out there watching. But yeah, I mean, I'll say, I think first off, I don't know if it's an issue I have, but I just see it a lot where people just kind of thumbs down tech in general, and just like, hey, it's a waste. Like, all this stuff is sitting around. There's no value to it. It's just people buying shiny stuff to buy shiny stuff. I mean, we have had, within the last 6 months, we implemented some technology, and we did it at a pretty large scale. I mean, a really large scale. And really how we managed to do it was, we kept everything de-identified. We may change that later, but for now it was like, hey, we want to get people in using it, trying it out. We don't want the fact that their information is linked to it in any way to deter them from trying it. To the command team, hey, this is, we're just looking at trends. Like, we're not going to look down to the individual person and see what, Johnny did last Friday night, but we are going to look at general trends so that we can advise on, hey, these are times a year when things dip or things spike or whatever it is. And so, so we did it that way. We implemented it that way. And, I would say the success that I've seen come out of that is I had a soldier operator, an older operator, come to me and say, hey, it was a sleep product. Hey, I always thought that, like, hey, I got 8 hours of sleep and I was cool. Like, I'm now seeing that I get less than 1 hour of REM sleep a night. Like, that is a problem. And that lines up with, I've been seeing the mental health professional about this, and I'm having trouble focusing. And, I got my bell rung a couple times by some large ammo stuff back in the day, and, stupid stuff we were doing as young soldiers that we thought was fun, I think is like catching up to me now. So, man, in that moment, that was a success story for me, because that's someone who's coming to me and talking to me that would have never talked to me based off the tech. And at that point, like, who cares if it's accurate? Who cares if it's an hour or they're getting 49 minutes or they're getting an hour and 10 minutes? Who cares? Like, they see that validates the way that they've been feeling and thinking, and it starts a conversation. And to me, that's 100% worth the investment in the technology. If we can start conversations that we never would have started without that system or that device or that wearable. Now, the challenge comes on the back end of, all right, now that we've identified that, what do we do about it? And that's what we're working through now. How do we educate? Like, I don't really know if we can modify behavior, but we can educate, and I think we work with a population that is open to education. And hey, if we're gonna do this challenge where, you don't drink on Fridays for the month of July, and we just want to see how you feel, what your data shows you on Saturday and Sunday. Like, we're not telling you stop drinking. That's unrealistic. We're just, hey, try this for the short amount of time. Hey, try not drinking that 5 o'clock coffee that's just hanging around everywhere in these buildings. Like, stop drinking caffeine after 1 o'clock for the next week. See what
The
happens.
fact your guys are drinking coffee at 5 p.m. is better than crushing a bang. That's what most of our guys
No.
are doing, and a
The-
can of Skull.
Well, yeah, the banks are probably hiding out in their office, but the coffee pots are out in public. But yeah, so I mean, that to me, that's a huge success story of, a little bit of tech that just started conversations and started people actually paying attention to those things and asking questions and wondering why things are going one way or another, or how we talk about like the holistic effect or the holistic part of these programs. And that's one where you're taking some of that physical stuff and you're starting to connect it to the cognitive, to the behavioral stuff. Even the chaplains and the spiritual folks, like they can get involved. Like
Mhm.
everybody's involved. We get our family programs person in there, like start talking about, hey, is everything okay with the family at home? Like, are there things we can do to try to help? All because that person is like, hey man, my sleep is off. And now I have this data point that backs that up. Or the other part of it is, hey, we want to because I see this thing as like it's a continuum from dead and dying, let's say on the left, to Usain Bolt in the 100-meter dash on the right. And so like we are using tech as a precursor to how do we identify and start the conversation so that you can then go to your medical provider and say, hey, here, I'm not sleeping well. Here's some data that I've collected through this. It's not a medical device, but it's showing some weird things. Can I get a sleep test? Can I get, diagnosed for something? Can I get that documented in my VA record? So now we've built even more trust. We've helped them out medically. It's a win-win. So, I would like that's probably the coolest thing that I've seen come out of this. And it happened fairly recently.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are the great conversations. So looking ahead, right? How do you envision, if you had a magic wand, the future of human performance initiatives and technology and how they're going to work together? Is it just, we implant magical chips in these guys' brains and it makes them Jason Bournes, or, more realistic there?
Yeah, not so it's hard for me. I struggle with where we need to go because it kind of comes down to what tech and software is. And I think people have a misconception about it. And so, it's like I discovered back in my bridge days, and I see it now where it's like, hey, we got to have like, hey, it's great that I can see my jump score and stuff through my Sparta app. I can see my volume and load through my Bridge Athletic app. I can see, you know, my Aura Ring stuff or my Whoop score or whatever. And people say, well, we need to have one place where all this stuff sits. And we need to find a product that does all this. And there's this like holy grail search for that. And I would argue that that's the wrong answer. Like you don't go to Sornex and ask, hey, can you build me a treadmill? Like they don't do treadmills. You don't go to Woodway and ask for a squat rack. They don't do that. But as soon as it's software and it's tech, it's like, well, if you do that, why can't you do it all? Like, because it takes a lot to be really good at that one particular component of performance. And so I guess the where I'd like to see it go is somewhere where all of those successful pieces of wearables, tech, whatever, can be seen in one place without compromising. Like, hey, I'm going to have one platform that has, it makes its own sleep, wearable. It makes its own GPS tracker. It makes its own force plate. It makes its own strength and conditioning software. It pulls your glucose numbers and all that other crazy wazoo stuff, and it pulls it into one thing. Like that is just not, I don't think that's good for anybody, but I don't know how we get there because from a business standpoint, like there's some conflicts there too. So, my hope is that at least in the DoD space, we can get better at automating the collection because, we're still struggling with that. And that's not necessarily a tech problem. I think it's the DoD problem. But I hope that in 5-10 years, we're automating that. I hope we're bringing a quick, actionable, deliverable to the soldier, to the service member, that they can understand and or have follow-up questions, conversations with the professional on. And I hope that's kind of all in as much of one place as we can make it. How we get there, I'm not that smart. I don't know. But that would be my my hope is that's kind of where we're at, in 5 years when we redo this webinar.
Yeah. I mean, specialization is important. Specialization is why free market capitalism happened, right? Everyone, you
Right.
can't make your own pencil. You have to buy certain things from other people. So the government thinking that there can be one tech solution is crazy. And then I think the other piece to that is like, there's like diversification. Like when you're an NFL, you get drafted by the NFL, they tell you to get your separate lawyer, a separate agent, and a separate, money manager, because if it's all in one spot, that's where there's actually more risk, right? So like when it
Yeah.
comes to data breaches, all that data
Yeah.
sitting in one spot's a bigger risk. But if it's diversified through these three different, groups, to me, that's like potentially a little risky or less risky. And
Yeah.
that kind of, you're kind of speaking my language when it comes to these, tech and, software services models. Like we on the vendor side need to have more partnerships with each other and say, like, we're going to work together to make it stickier for both our products to be successful in this. And like, we're not a workout creator. There's Bridge Athletics that can do that better than us. And they have a software team that's even better at it than we are. And working together as a
Right.
partner, that's how we're all gonna be successful. And more importantly, that's how like the DoD and the operators gonna be successful because of this partnership. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you, filling my own bias with telling me that I'm right.
Yeah, well, it's not just a DoD thing. I think it happens in pro sport, college, like anywhere where there's software, people just expect that everything can be, one company can just go out there and do it all. I mean, I guess Apple kind of, but like that's an anomaly. Like that doesn't happen. But yeah,
Just ones and
totally
zeros.
agree.
Why can't you figure it out?
Yeah, if only it were that easy.
I think we got one question here. Let's see what's going on. So I'm going to just read this from the screen. So if it's kind of choppy, I apologize. When hiring new coaches, how do you screen for a coach experience versus aptitude and attitude versus technology adoption and application? So looking at the coach, when you're looking at them, coaching experience, their knowledge of the tech in the previous, what are you looking there for these hiring these younger coaches?
Yeah. So to me, um, that may be an ancillary question, but really when I'm looking at hiring a new coach, I'm looking at what is it like not the like teachable skills. Like, hey, I can teach somebody to be good at tech. I can't teach somebody to be a good teammate. I can't teach someone to have empathy. I can't teach them to 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 work with people and to try to problem solve. So yeah, like it might be, the fifth or sixth question on an interview is like, hey, I see you've worked with, X technology. How did you utilize it? But I'm waiting more, hey, tell me about a time that you failed and how did you address that? How have you changed your approach? Tell me about a time you had to work with a team that thought, that had a different idea than you. Like those are the things that I'm more concerned with than, hey, have you used Sparta before? Have you used the GPS technology piece? Like, because we can all work together and learn that together. But if I can't get along with you as a person, you can't get along with the team, like everybody's going to fall if that's the case.
So they kind of followed up with what you were saying there. So there was a little bit more to the question about kind of balancing experience with growth mindsets. And sometimes there's these really great coaches that may feel like, hey, I know more than everybody else because I'm a great coach, and maybe they have less growth mindset. So, so do you, what does it say? But do you see that having lots of coaching experience with no tech becomes a barrier when it comes to tech adoption? Or yeah, just kind of once you kind of check those buckets of empathy and growth mindset, that guy probably would be an early adopter, or maybe not early adopter, but at least
Yeah,
be an adopter versus a
yeah,
Luddite.
yeah. I think you can ask that question. I think, I mean, I do think maybe not a young coach, but at some point, say mid level coach, higher level coach. I mean, we definitely would like to know, have you used data to drive informed decisions? And that could be tech, that could be an Excel document, that could be, hey, I built this questionnaire and Survey Monkey, and I use that to manipulate training for the day, like that's using data to drive decision, and that's not high tech stuff. That could even be, hey, I typed this thing out on Google Sheets and I made 50 copies of it, and people circle how they feel, and that's how we drive the workout. Like, I think as a young coach, I think it'd be hard nowadays to not at least be able to show that you've been around tech.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I interned at this place, and yeah, I didn't get to run it, but they were using Catapult. Cool. Like, what'd you like about it? What did you not like? What would you do differently? We can ask a lot of questions based off of that. I think it's, if you get to that kind of mid-level coach, maybe higher, and you don't have a lot of instances of them using data to make informed decisions, that's where it potentially becomes a barrier and a problem.
Gotcha. I love it.
Hopefully I answered that okay.
You did. So we're about to finish this up, but just kind of a plug for myself. I will be at TSAC, and I believe Ryan will also be at TSAC. So if you see us there, come by, grab a drink with us, say hello. But I want to thank you so much, Ryan, for your time this evening, chatting with us, even when you're traveling to DC. And the floor is yours if you want to say anything to the audience.
No, I appreciate everybody jumping on. Like you said, Thomas, a lot of folks I recognize, and everybody that I see on here has played a role in some part in my growth and my development as a coach and as a person. So, I appreciate you guys jumping on, and I'm kind of at that borderline of like I'm social media savvy, but not really savvy. But if people want to connect, like definitely, I think it's at RCSC, so Ryan Carroll Strength Coach 14. Hit me up through that. You can find me on LinkedIn. Please reach out. Would love to help answer any questions or just learn from you guys as well. So thanks for the opportunity, Thomas. And I think that's it.
Thanks again. Thank you to Ryan, and thank you for all that have joined us. And hopefully we'll see you at TSAC. Have a great evening.